guys, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. It's Brittany here with another video to help you guys live a happy, healthy, awesome life in a wheelchair. And today I am talking about 5 different ways to pee when you're paralyzed. When I was first paralyzed, I learned exactly one way that I would have to go to the bathroom. They didn't tell me any other ways. They didn't give me any options. I understand why they did it. They were suggesting the sort of gold standard for managing a neurogenic bladder, but they still didn't give me the option. And I didn't learn these options that I'm going to share with you guys until I found friends that all use these options. And everybody's different, so I believe everybody should have a lot of information to be able to choose from, and then they can make their own choice. So if you are newly paralyzed and you're watching this, I'm going to give you all of the options that you have for how to pee when you're paralyzed, and then you can decide. Probably have to go ask your doctor about it because they probably didn't give you all of these options. And they work for different people. Everybody has different abilities and preferences, so I think everybody should be able to choose what they want. Okay guys, I am stopping and pausing this video because I literally forgot to do the one thing that I was supposed to do in the intro of the video, which is to tell you guys that the contest for the $1,000 worth of catheters that I mentioned in my video maybe a month ago is extended. So in the link, there is a link in the description of this video for where you can go to enter to win 6 boxes of free catheters from Coloplast. They are Speedy Cath standard catheters, and it's $1,000 worth of catheters for one of you guys. So go click that link in the description of this video and go enter that giveaway because it's a lot of free catheters. Okay, let's get started with number 1. And that is the way that I learned how to pee after I was paralyzed, and that is intermittent catheterization. So intermittent catheterization is basically just inserting a catheter into your bladder using your urethra each time you have to pee. So hopefully you're using a clean catheter every time. Not everybody does that. Some people reuse catheters and wash them, but generally you're using a different catheter each time you go to the bathroom and you're inserting into your bladder through your urethra. The benefits of intermittent catheterization are less UTIs, there's no indwelling catheter so that you don't have to fumble with, the indwelling catheter in the bag and all that stuff when you get dressed. Your bladder remains functional, so it fills up like it normally would. The bladder muscle still has to function and stretch and all of those things, so it's working as normally as possible as it can with a neurogenic bladder. If you're paralyzed or whatever kind of reason you have for using a catheter, your bladder still is filling up and functioning the way it's supposed to function. The cons of intermittent catheterization are that you have to carry all the catheters with you, which is super annoying sometimes, and that can get expensive because if you're like me and you're not reusing catheters, I luckily have insurance, but if you're paying for them out of pocket, then you have to pay for a new catheter every time. If you're not paying for a new catheter, you have to wash catheters. And that's annoying too. So you have to have multiple catheters in order to be able to do intermittent catheterization. It's kind of difficult to learn because, especially if you can't feel, then you have to be able to do it by touch technique, which can be really difficult. And if you have lower hand dexterity or hand function or something like that, then it can be a challenge to do intermittent catheterization because you're having to catheterize multiple times a day, and that can take time and be difficult. And then the last thing is just that it's not possible to be done independently by some people. So there's just some people out there that can't use intermittent catheterization or that couldn't do it independently. So that's a con of it. Moving on to number 2. The second way to pee when you're paralyzed is an indwelling catheter, which is a catheter that stays in your bladder. Once you put the catheter in your bladder, then you blow up a little balloon that allows it to stay in there and doesn't pull out, and you're using your urethra again. So it's an indwelling catheter through your urethra. The benefits of it, less expensive. You only have to use one catheter. You only have to change it, I think like once a week. I'm not even sure. Maybe as long as once a month. I don't know, but you don't have to change it that much. Everybody's probably different. You have less chance of incontinence than with intermittent catheterization because if you have intermittent catheter, if you're doing intermittent catheterization, your bladder's full, and if your bladder spasms, then you can have incontinence. So you have less chance of incontinence with an indwelling catheter because there's no urine in your bladder. You can leak around the outside or around the catheter, but less chance of major incontinence. And then the cons are more UTIs because there's always a highway, I guess, from the outside to the inside that the bacteria can travel up. The bladder shrinks and is no longer able to function as normal if you've had an indwelling catheter for a really long time because the muscle just atrophies. It gets smaller. It can leak around the catheter that's in there. I already mentioned that. It's cumbersome to be able to manage the bag for the catheter and the catheter itself. You have to constantly be paying attention to that when you're getting dressed and covering it with clothes. And it can make intimacy a challenge. So that's probably why intermittent catheterization is more popular, except for people with less function and hand dexterity, because there are quite a few cons of an indwelling catheter. So that is how to pee when you're paralyzed. Way number 2. Moving on to number 3 is a suprapubic catheter, and a suprapubic catheter is a catheter that is inserted into your bladder through a cut that they make in your abdomen, just in your lower abdomen, below your belly button or somewhere around there. And it is done using local anesthetic. Usually you just go into a urologist's office, they just make the insertion, put the tube in, and then they leave it in there. And as long as the tube stays in there, then it doesn't like heal over. It can be used with a clamp or without a clamp. So you can attach the catheter that is inserted in the little cut that they make into your bladder. That can be attached to a bag on the outside, on your leg or on your stomach, or it can be clamped. And if it's clamped, then your bladder will fill up. And if it's not clamped, then you'll get some of the same things as when you have an indwelling catheter that's not in your urethra. It's just coming out a different way. So benefits of a suprapubic catheter is less UTI risk. Just in general, it's not the where the catheter is actually going up is farther away from the bacteria that are in your perineal area. So just less chance of those kinds of bacteria traveling up the catheter because it's on your abdomen and not near your butt. And then it's easier to manage for people that have limited hand dexterity or sensation. If you can't feel and you have a lower hand function, then a suprapubic catheter is easier to insert than inserting an indwelling catheter in your urethra. And if you have it on a clamp, it's easier to empty because you can actually see it rather than having to empty it somewhere that you can't see very well. So it's just easier to use for people with lower function and hand dexterity. Another thing that's good about it is that it's reversible. So if you take the catheter out in the cut that the urologist makes, it'll just grow in. It's kind of like getting your ears pierced. If you take the earring out and you don't ever wear earrings, it's just going to grow in. It's less expensive than intermittent catheterization, just like an indwelling catheter, because you're not putting the catheter in all the time. You're not changing it as often. And then the last thing is that it's easier with intimacy. So it functions basically, especially if you have it attached to a bag like an indwelling catheter, except it's not down near your genitals where intimacy happens. So it's not interfering with that, and it's not making that awkward, and you don't have to be careful that you're gonna rip something out or, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's just easier with intimacy to have a suprapubic catheter that's higher up on your abdomen and not where you need to be intimate. And then the cons of a suprapubic catheter is that if you are using a bag like an indwelling catheter, then your bladder is going to shrink. You have a risk of infection at the insertion site, so where the urologist makes the insertion, because it is a cut, you have a risk of infection. So those are the two major cons of a suprapubic catheter. I have lots of friends with suprapubic catheters. I had no idea that this was even a thing. And I think if I had known, I probably would have used this early on because I was really young and it was really intimidating for me to learn how to cath using touch technique from my urethra. And I didn't do it for 4 years. I just let my mom do it. So I think having a suprapubic catheter would have given me a lot more independence. I don't know. I'm glad now that I know how to cath the way I do. So I don't know whether it's a good thing, whether it would have been a good thing if I would have gotten used to a suprapubic catheter, but I think it would have given me more independence if I had known that it was a possibility. I just wish that doctors had at least given me the option so that I could make a choice about whether intermittent catheterization was going to work for me or if I had other options. Okay, so that is number 3 for how to pee when you're paralyzed. Number 4 is something called a Mitrofanoff surgery. And this is a surgery where they create a channel from your belly button or near your belly button to your bladder using like your appendix or a part of your intestine. And it's different than a suprapubic catheter because they're actually creating a channel that you're going to use to do intermittent catheterization. Whereas a suprapubic catheter, you have to keep that tube in there all the time, otherwise it will grow in. The Mitrofanoff won't grow in. You can just do intermittent catheterization and it won't grow in unless you don't cath regularly. Then the stoma on the outside, which is the opening to the Mitrofanoff channel, that can potentially grow over and then they'll have to open that up. But the tube itself isn't going to close up and heal up like the suprapubic catheter would. It's often done with bladder augmentation, so it's often done with an enlargement of the bladder as well. So the benefits of the Mitrofanoff surgery are that it makes it easier to cath for people with limited hand dexterity. This is one of the most obvious benefits and the reason that the Mitrofanoff surgery was even created, because some people just don't have the ability to be independent with cathing, and this allows them to do independent intermittent catheterization. Another benefit of it is it lowers the risk of UTI, just like the suprapubic catheter does, because you're avoiding the bacteria in the perineal area. For anybody that doesn't know what the perineal is, that's like in between your vagina and your anus. So it's like a highway for bacteria to travel from your anus to your urethra, and so you're just avoiding that altogether because the catheter is not going in that area. So you don't have to worry about those bacteria. There's other bacteria on the surface of your skin, but it's less and less infectious than the bacteria that are coming from that perineal area. So those are the two major benefits. Easier for people to be able to cath in an area that they can see, and avoiding the bacteria in your perineal area. And then the cons of it are that it's a major surgery. It carries all the risks of a major surgery: infection, death, all of that stuff. So that's a giant risk people are taking for their independence. And for some people, it's worth that risk. So that's one of the major cons. The stoma, which is like the opening, where the opening of the channel is on the outside of your skin, that can leak mucus because they use your appendix or a part of your intestine to actually make the channel. And then mucus can also plug the channel itself that they create with your intestine. It's always creating mucus, so it can plug that, so you have to sometimes flush it out. And then just in general, because there's mucus in the channel that they create from the intestinal material, it can get mucus inside of your bladder, so you have to flush or irrigate your bladder to get that mucus out every once in a while. So those are the major cons of the Mitrofanoff. And funny story, I was actually going to get this surgery. I was 17 and I hadn't learned how to do intermittent catheterization on my own yet. My mom had been doing it for the first 3 years that I was paralyzed, and I just didn't think there was any hope of me ever learning how to do intermittent catheterization on my own with touch technique, because I can't feel, and I didn't think I was going to be able to use touch technique. It just didn't seem possible for me in my mind at the time. And so I looked up this surgery because I heard about it. I scheduled it and was literally in the hospital in the pre-op room when I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? I haven't even given intermittent catheterization a real fair shot. So I backed out. The surgeon was like, yeah, no problem. Like, this is an elective surgery. You do whatever you have to do. So we left the hospital and I began really trying in earnest to learn how to do intermittent catheterization. And obviously I have learned and did learn, but that was going to be my solution to my independence, because I just didn't think that intermittent catheterization was possible. So I'm so glad that I didn't go through with it, because, you know, major risk, surgery risk. But there's a lot of people that I know that have had this surgery and they're happy with it. Like, nobody regrets it. So I think I probably would have been okay too. I just am really glad that I avoided a surgery and have learned to cath without it. Okay, so last one, and this is the most extreme one, and I'd never really heard of this until recently when a friend told me that this is how she pees. So last way to pee when you're paralyzed is something called a urostomy. So this is very similar to a colonoscopy, where they direct part of your intestine to your like abdominal wall, and then you have to wear a bag that catches your stool. This is very similar to that, where they direct your urine to a bag on the outside of your abdomen. And my friend that actually pees this way, she doesn't have a bladder at all. She just had so many bladder infections when she was younger, because she's been paralyzed for many, many years, that her bladder was just destroyed and it kept getting infected, and there was just nothing they could do for her anymore. So she actually had to have her bladder removed because she was so sick all the time. And the urostomy was really her only option. So they make a channel conduit similar to in a Mitrofanoff surgery to the outside of your abdomen. This one is really extreme, but also kind of neat at the same time. The benefits of it are no incontinence, so you're not going to be incontinent from below anymore because you literally don't have a bladder. It's easy to empty the urine because you're literally just emptying it on from a bag on your abdomen. And then the cons of it are that it's irreversible. If you have your bladder removed. I believe that this happens if people have bladder surgery, so that is reversible. But if you have your bladder removed and that's why you have the urostomy, then it is irreversible. It can have blockages in the channel with mucus, just like with a Mitrofanoff surgery, because you're using part of your intestine to actually form the new conduit. And then it's a risk of a surgery and infection, all of that stuff that come with a major surgery. So that is the last one. There are more ways to pee when you're paralyzed than I thought. I only knew of Indwelling Catheter and Intermittent Catheterization when I was first paralyzed, and only knew of the Mitrofanoff a couple of years after I was paralyzed, but I knew nothing about a suprapubic, which I think is a way easier, very similar thing to a Mitrofanoff, so I'm not entirely sure why people opt for that one. Other than being able to do intermittent catheterization and not having to have that clamp thing on, but very similar concept. But yeah, there's lots of ways to pee when you're paralyzed, and I just wanted to share some of the ones that I know of with you guys. I have friends that use all of these different ways, so I know that you can have a happy, healthy, successful life using any of these techniques to go to the bathroom after you're paralyzed. And really it's just about staying continent, because you don't want to be peeing your pants all the time, having a convenient way to empty your bladder, and staying healthy while you're doing both of those things. So I hope this video was helpful to you guys. If you guys know of any other ways to pee when you're paralyzed, please put them in the comments, because that's always a wealth of information, and I learn a lot from you guys. So put that in the comments if there's something else you guys want to add. If there's ones that you guys didn't know about, please also put that in the comments, because it's interesting to me how many people are paralyzed for so many years and we just don't know very much about the things that are available to us. I was paralyzed for so many years and didn't know so many of the things that I just talked about until a few years ago. So if there was something that you learned today, let me know. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you back here again next week. Bye guys.